I want you to hear the word of Jesus. He says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you a Roomba, a robot vacuum." All right, isn't that what we all need when we're worn out? I mean, a vacuum that can vacuum itself all around the house. It's amazing, isn't it? Especially if you have a pet to clean up after. Unless that pet is prone to accidents in the house. I've heard disaster stories. You don't want a Roomba then if that's the case. But I mean, think about this. This is amazing. Robot vacuums, just like do the vacuuming all on their own. This is crazy. I had a moment the other day where I was just looking around at the world that we live in, and I'm just thinking, this is crazy. I can't believe this is our world. This is not what I expected as a kid. I feel like I'm living in the Jetsons. It's amazing. And I'm a guy who loves innovations, especially innovations that promise efficiency. Anybody else? Yeah, I mean, if you can do the work that you have to do in less time, if you can make more room in life for the stuff that matters most to you, the stuff that you care about most by increasing your efficiency, God be praised, right? It's a great way to live. Except it seems like it doesn't always work out the way that we might think. I mean, have you noticed that in spite of all of those time-saving or labor-saving devices that now fill our lives, have you noticed that you still don't seem to have enough time for the things that you care most about? It's interesting. Back in 1967, there was a Senate subcommittee hearing on labor development, technology. 1967, they said by 1985, 18 years later, they predicted that the average American would only have to work 22 hours a week. How's that working for you, right? Actually, the stats went the other way. From 1967 up until now, the average hours that an American works has just gone up, up, up. Why is that? With all the stuff that we have. Or you think back to when convenience lifestyle stuff was happening, you know, electric vacuum cleaners, the premier duplex, twice the cleaning, twice the leisure, right? Just vacuum your way to a leisure-filled life. Or what about this one? I love this. For a wash day as work-free as science can make it, you know, like you can just, your laundry's gonna do itself, you get to sit and read a magazine. How life is now, right? We just sit around reading magazines all day. Or I love this one. This new revolutionary iron, you can even sit down while you iron. I mean, this is gonna be a life-changing thing. You know, you don't have to stand up in front of a big, you can just sit down and iron. And you think about all these things and the promises that they've made, and yet these are empty promises, aren't they? I mean, we're busier than ever. We feel more stressed. We feel life is more hectic than ever. And I think part of that is with every new efficiency, every new innovation that promises efficiency, as we create room, what do? We just fill it with other things that aren't ultimately important, but things that feel like they matter. We have efficiencies, and so we buy bigger houses that require more care, and we stop asking other people for help, or we stop, taking our laundry to the wash and fold. Instead, we can do it all ourselves. We can do it all ourselves, and we try to do it all of ourselves. And oh, by the way, now we all have to work in order to pay for these houses filled with stuff. It's interesting how it doesn't work out the way that we would expect. And today, that's what we're going to talk about in the final week of the series. We're going to talk about the hidden costs of building our lives around this idea of efficiency. And I want to start with the person of Jesus, because Jesus, he lived a really busy life. I mean, if you just read one of the Gospels the whole way through, you'll see how hectic and hurried his world was. I mean, think about this. When it came to Jesus, everyone in the world needed him, literally, everyone, right? It wasn't just like an idea in his head. No one else could fill the void that Jesus was on the planet to fill. We may sometimes imagine that we are God's gift to the world. Jesus actually was, right? And so imagine the pressure, imagine the burden that he carried around. I mean, again, you see it if you read through the Gospels. And what's interesting to me is we're gonna look today at Matthew chapter 8. There was a moment that happened in Jesus' ministry where everything could have shifted, where everything really should have shifted. It should have been a game-changing moment for this guy who had such an important ministry in such a busy life. And it all happened, I wanna show you this moment, it all happened when a high-ranking Roman military officer came and sought out Jesus' help, just like so many other people had been doing. It said, when Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion, he's a high-ranking army official in Rome, came to him asking for help. Lord, he said, my servant lies at home paralyzed, suffering terribly. And Jesus said to him, shall I come and heal him? So this guy's at home, he's paralyzed. I mean, should I come over to your house and heal him? The centurion replied, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. Now, part of this probably was, as a centurion, he was likely a Gentile. And so we've talked about this recently. In order for a Jewish person to enter a Gentile house, he would become unclean. And the centurion realizes that and says, hey, I don't want you to go through the trouble of becoming ceremonially unclean on my behalf. Not only that, here's what I believe, that you can just say the word and my servant will be healed. For I myself, he said, am a man under authority. I understand how this stuff works. With soldiers under me, I tell this one, go, and he goes, and I tell that one, come, and he comes, and I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. And when Jesus heard this, he was amazed and said to those following him, right? He turns to his disciples and says, truly, I tell you, look at this guy. I've not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. He gets it. And in fact, I say to you that many will come from the east and from the west, from all these outside nations, and they will take their place at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But some of the subjects of the kingdom, like Israel, the people that I've entrusted this to for all of these years, they will be thrown outside on account of their lack of faith, their lack of belief. They'll be thrown outside into darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And then Jesus turns back to the centurion and says, go, let it be done just as you believed it would. And his servant was healed at that very moment. Now understand this. This is a rare moment. Not only does the centurion have this great faith and he testifies to his faith, someone outside of Israel, but this is a very different moment because up to this point, Jesus, all of the healing that he did was in a very personal, very hands-on kind of way. People would bring their sick to Jesus, they'd get before Jesus, Jesus would lay his hand on them, and he would make them well. Sometimes he had to travel places to find sick people like he was offering to do for the centurion. Do you need me to come to your house? But everything was through very direct interaction. And this created all kinds of problems. I mean, it created a lot of logistical problems. If you read the Gospels, you'll know that there are moments where there are these healing marathons that are going on and people are coming from everywhere and Jesus is out in these remote places and from sun up to sundown, he's healing people and he's doing miracles and then it'll get late and the people don't have food and Jesus has to do another miracle to feed them. Or other times, the crowds get so excited for Jesus' healing that it turns into a mob and people are about to be crushed. And I mean, this was a logistical nightmare. Not only that, but Jesus sometimes found himself exhausted by all of this. There are moments where Jesus just kind of has to slip away from the crowds and go off to a solitary place on his own because the pressure is so overwhelming. And so this moment should have been a game changer, right? These are the moments where industries change in an instant. You discover an innovation, you discover a way to do what you do more efficiently, and it changes industries, right? This is the moment where Netflix says, hey, instead of mailing out envelopes full of DVDs, let's just stream our stuff. And everyone's like, whoa, and Blockbuster goes out of business then, because who needs a DVD anymore, right? Suddenly everything changes. Except in this very rare moment where Jesus had done something that he had not done before, just healing a guy from afar, healing a guy from a distance, this does not become a watershed game-changing moment for Jesus's ministry. In fact, Jesus, right after this, just goes back to the more normal, usual way of directly laying hands on people and healing them, people bringing their sick, him going out to meet sick people. In fact, later on in this chapter, Jesus is gonna get into a boat, right? Shortly after this whole thing happens, he gets into a boat and he goes all the way to the other side of this lake to this Gentile region. And I wanna show you what happens, just how counter this is to this moment of innovation and efficiency we just saw with the centurion. It says, when he arrived at the other side of the big lake in the region of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men coming from the tombs met him. And they were so violent that no one could pass that way. "What do you want with us, Son of God?" they shouted. "Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?" Before the end times when Jesus will defeat all evil, put it under his feet. Some distance from them, a large herd of pigs was feeding. And the demons begged Jesus, "If you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs." And he said to them, "Go." So they came out of the men and they went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake, and they died in the water. And those tending the pigs, of course, they were freaked out and mad. They ran off. They went into the town and they reported all this, including what had happened to the 2 demon-possessed men. And then the whole town went out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region. Now, there are a bunch of things in this that we're not going to talk about today. I mean, this is like a weird, like intriguing encounter with Jesus. And here's what I want you to see. Here's what I want you to notice. That Jesus gets in a boat, travels across this lake. He meets these 2 guys, heals the guys. The people don't like it. They freak out. They say, "Please leave." Jesus obliges them. He gets back in the boat, travels all the way back to where he started from, to the other side of the lake. I don't think I need to explain to you that this is horribly inefficient, right? In a world full of people who needed Jesus, these men were not the only 2. The fact that Jesus would spend all of this time and effort, boat ride after boat ride for the sake of 2 guys, it's crazy, it's madness for us. And again, while we might have all kinds of other questions here, here's the question that I just want us to think about today, because I think it's really important for us. Why does Jesus persist in doing things this way, even after this breakthrough moment where he could just heal people by, get on a bullhorn and just say, "You're healed," and anyone who heard his voice could be healed? This could have been a game-changing thing. Why does Jesus persist in doing his ministry in this way? Why does he persist in conducting his life in this way? And there are probably lots of answers, but here's one I can be sure of. Jesus preferred presence over efficiency. You see it if you read the Gospels. Jesus preferred presence over efficiency. Jesus knew that it was more important to be present with people than to create an assembly line and do things kind of in a mass way. And here's what I want us to realize, that Jesus is showing us something about the way we are called to live. He's showing us that no matter how efficient you get, if that costs you the ability to be present in the present moment with the people around you, present with God himself, more will be lost than efficiency can ever gain you. And isn't this important for the world that we're living in right now? It puts efficiency so high on the task where efficiency seems necessary just to survive day after day. I mean, isn't this important after the year that we've been through where we've discovered all these efficient things? Let me talk for a second about what I mean by presence, in case this confuses you, though. Let me just pause here for a second. Presence, when I say presence, what I'm talking about is Psalm 46, where God says, "Be still and know that I'm God." Have you heard this psalm before? It's a great psalm. Be still and know that I'm God. Short, pithy, easy to memorize, hard to do. Right? What God is calling us to do here is to be able to sit with him, to be still, to sit with ourselves, to be able to sit in the middle of all of the noise and the need of the world around us and not be bothered by it, not to let that cause us unease, not to feel responsible for all of it. What God's calling us to do is just to be able to sit, to be still, to hear all the noise, to hear all the need, and to know that God is God and we are not. And this is something that Jesus even does really, really well. He shows us in a hectic world where everyone was demanding his attention, he shows us what it looks like to sit unhurried, undistracted with another person and to be okay with the noise of the world, just being with another person. Even Jesus, who was fully God, he was able to do this, to limit himself in this way. And sometimes people say, well, can you imagine what it would have been like if Jesus would have come today, right? If he would have come in our world, can you imagine what his ministry would have looked like? If instead of walking around on dusty flip-flops, he could get on a jet plane and travel anywhere, or he could be on FaceTime with someone in an instant, or he could be, like a YouTube sensation. Imagine that. Think about all the stuff on YouTube. I mean, Jesus would definitely be more interesting. And yet, the reality we have to wrestle with in all of that is, if Jesus had come into our world today as it is now, I think his ministry probably would have been 2 years shorter, not because it would have been that much more efficient, but because he would have gotten canceled way earlier. The bad guys would have caught up with him way quicker. I mean, the lynch mob would have been waiting for him way quicker. That's how our world seems to work. But here's what else is true. If Jesus would have chosen to come today rather than the time that he did, yes, I think he could have been a lot more efficient, but his ministry would have been way less effective. And here's how I can say that with confidence, that God was not in a hurry to send Jesus into the world. A lot of time passed between the Garden of Eden and the moment Jesus actually came, which means that if God thought it was advantageous to wait just a little bit longer until we had jet planes and air travel and all the technology that we have, he would have waited. We're the impatient ones. God has no problem with waiting. The fact that God sent Jesus, that Jesus came down at the moment that he did, means that was the exact world that God wanted to enter. See, Jesus deliberately came at a time when you had to walk places and you had to talk face to face to people and you had to sit down and eat long meals with people in order to gain their trust, in order to be able to speak into their life. You had to go through this whole ritual of table fellowship before you could speak into someone's life or correct them or instruct them or enlighten them. It was a whole process that you would go through first. Jesus came deliberately at a time when presence, not efficiency, when presence was still the way of the world. And do you think that was any kind of accident? And I know it's way less efficient, but it is way more effective. See, while God himself is omnipresent, he could be many places at once. I mean, God decided to limit himself to one time and one space. That's inefficient. And yet, even in the fact that Jesus came down in the flesh is showing us the better thing for us, far greater than efficiency. There's something for us in presence. And I know from our vantage point, God is horribly inefficient sometimes, isn't he? I mean, the ministry of Jesus, or what about this, that parable that I think most of us have heard about a good shepherd who leaves behind 99 sheep in search of the lost sheep. It's the story Jesus tells. Won't a shepherd leave behind the 99 that are safely in the pen to go out into the open country to find the one lost sheep? And we hear that and we're like, yeah. That's horribly inefficient. If you want to make money as a shepherd, don't jeopardize 99 sheep to go after one, right? I mean, that's maddening. That's crazy. It's so inefficient. Unless you've ever been that lost sheep. Right, if you've ever experienced a moment in your life where you have been lost, and maybe it's through no fault of your own, or maybe you got lost because you were being hard-headed and disobedient and you were afraid and you ran away. You know that if you've ever been that lost sheep, and the reality is all of us have been at one point in our lives, whether we recognize it or not. Maybe some of us right now are feeling that exact way. If you've ever been that lost sheep, you know that is inefficient to leave behind the 99 for the shepherd to track down that one sheep. You know it's inefficient, but you know it is powerful and effective. Right? To know that in a planet of 8 billion people, to God, you are not just a number. To know that God prizes you so much that he would give all of his attention, all of his focus to pursuing you, to finding you, that you matter so much to him that he was willing to limit himself of his omnipresence, and he was willing to put on flesh and walk around in this clunky world and suffer and die in order to rescue you and reconcile you, to bring you back into the safety of the family of God. It is not efficient at all. But come on, tell me, if you've been that lost sheep, it is effective when God meets you in that way. It is life-changing. And I don't know about you, but I feel inspired by that. I feel grateful about that. I also feel convicted by this, because as a husband and a father, I often choose efficiency over presence. As a leader, I often feel like I have to do the same. What about you? I mean, aren't we making this trade-off all of the time, putting efficiency over presence? And yet when I look at Jesus, when I look at his ministry, here's what I see. He again and again puts presence over efficiency. And here are some conclusions I draw from that. The first is productivity and efficiency can become idols for us. Not only can they become idols, they have become idols for us. Right? I mean, two scripts run in our minds all the time. I know they run in mine. One of them is this script that I fight against all the time, and yet it runs all the time. More is better. Man, I love getting the Costco promotional emails. And I find myself looking for stuff, just being like, oh, Costco has some amazing stuff. I just go through that, and I'm looking for things that I don't even know that I need, right? But I'm just, oh, this would make my life better. More is better, right? That's one of the scripts that runs through our head all the time. But not just more is better. There's another script that runs through our head all the time. And heads all the time, and that is, it's all on me. And if those things are true, more is better, and it's all on me, then productivity and efficiency, they are the way, right? Because I've got to be productive, I've got to be efficient. No one else is going to help me out. If I'm going to get more, if more is better, then I've got, these things have to become like the foundation of my life. And yet, what do you see from Jesus? What do you see from his life? What do you see from the teaching of Scripture? You don't see productivity and efficiency being the number one rule. Instead you see the opposite. You see this concept of daily bread. Daily bread. You don't have to be very productive or efficient to get daily bread. I mean, bread isn't the finest food that you can imagine. It's just enough to sustain you. It doesn't take much to acquire daily bread. And here's the mind-blowing thing for me. Even though daily bread isn't much for us to go, to get for ourselves, Jesus even teaches us to pray and ask our Father in heaven to give us daily bread. He says, you know what? Even the lesser things in life, they're not all up to you. God will provide those things for you if you just ask him to. See, Jesus is so countercultural on this stuff. Instead of productivity and efficiency being the way of life, he says, no, you got it wrong. Just focus on daily bread. Just focus on what you need for today. Ask God for it. It's not all up to you. More isn't always better. And here's what you'll find. You'll find a richer way of living when you throw off the idols of productivity and efficiency. Not only that, here's what else we see from Jesus, that not every problem can be solved. So stop obsessing. Right? I mean, Jesus, he has this opportunity just to heal all of the world in an instant. And of course, in a deeper spiritual way, he did when he gave his life on the cross. He got to the deeper need, but there were all kinds of other needs that Jesus was okay ignoring. Not every person in the world that Jesus lived in was healed. Not every person was reached. Not every person was preached to. It didn't happen. And Jesus models this life that says, you know what, I could make an assembly line and just run people through it and get the job done. But he knew something. He knew that the healing that people need most was someone important like Jesus actually taking time for them. What so often we need most is just someone slowing down enough to see us. And guess what? That's what everyone around you needs too. Jesus also knew that it was important for himself too, not just for us, to not let human hurry sabotage his divine peace. See, we're living in this world with all these problems, and like there's this call all the time to like, we can stop this, we can change this, let's fix this now. And I don't know about you, but it is a game of whack-a-mole, right? The problems just keep coming up. It doesn't matter what we fix, there's more there. And Jesus is showing us that, yeah, pay attention to the things that are ahead of you. Don't be apathetic, don't be complacent. Be faithful with what's put right in front of your face, but stop worrying, stop obsessing about every problem, every need, every issue in the world. Instead, just focus on the things that are right in front of you. In the Bible, there's this concept of daily bread. There's also this concept of Sabbath. It's actually one of the 10 commandments. And yet, it is the commandment that most Christians feel proud about breaking. I've had people ask me to preach about a lot of sin, from the pulpit. I haven't heard many people ask me to be like, Pastor, you really need to preach about Sabbath breaking, right? Because for us, that just seems, no, productivity and efficiency, those are our idols. We can't take a day off. That's impractical. How are we ever gonna, get the stuff done or live our lives? And yet what God is saying when he's calling us to Sabbath is he's saying, hey, not every problem is gonna be solved. It's not all up to you. Stop obsessing. There's more to life than getting it done. The other conclusion I draw from Jesus and his intentional decision of how he conducted his ministry is human connection is irreplaceable. And I cannot leave this series without just beating this drum. Because I know Zoom meetings, they are way more efficient. Our board of directors, we've been meeting by Zoom, and it's kind of awesome. Like, I go into another room of the house, we're usually done in about 90 minutes, right? Watching church in your PJs, it's way less stressful. Being able to work from anywhere, being able to go on vacation and yet still get a paycheck because you're vacationing, but then you're working a little bit during the day. It is an amazing convenience. Being able to stay connected with loved ones, and I'm thinking about this all the time as I have a daughter who's ready to go far away for college. Being able to stay connected and to be able to see your loved ones through technology, it's amazing. And yet, please don't be misled. None of those things are a substitute for flesh and blood, face-to-face human connection. See, I fear that right now we're liking this efficiency thing so much that we're putting efficiency way over presence. And here's the problem: if we lose presence, if we lose that, then we lose ourselves. We lose what it means to be human. And if you look around at the world, if you look around at society, isn't that what you see? I mean, the inhumanity, the incivility of people is just, it's ridiculous, isn't it? And we think when did people start treating each other this way? When did people start acting this way toward each other? I think it's when we stopped connecting with one another. And over the last year, it's only gotten worse because we're no longer facing each other. And writing an email, that's easy to do and it's convenient. And I can do it at midnight and I can tell you what I think, or I can post something on social media really, really easily. But setting up a conversation and scheduling it and driving to the place and sitting for 90 minutes, even if it's socially distanced, and going through all the stuff that's required for true human connection, that's not efficient, but we all know it's powerful. It's way more effective. It's impossible to hate someone or to persist in just hard-heartedness when you're sitting across the table from them, right? One of my mentors was in the US Senate for several terms, and I was talking to him recently just about what's going on in politics. And here's what his take on this whole thing is, especially as it relates to the Senate, because that's where he served. His take is something changed in the 90s, and what changed is the Senate schedule. They changed the way the calendar worked for the Senate so that senators could travel home over longer weekends. And they could fundraise because, you got to raise a lot of money to get elected. And so fundraising became the thing. And in order to fundraise, man, you had to get in front of donors. You had to have lots of meetings. And so they changed the whole Senate schedule, built around efficiency, so that senators could do their work in Washington, then do their work back home. And he said, at that moment, when that changed, everything changed in Washington, at least in the Senate. Because now, instead of having your family living with you somewhere in the Washington area, in the DC area, instead of on weekends, Going over to the house of the person who sits across the aisle from you, who you ideologically do not agree with, and yet you're sitting in their backyard and your kids are playing together, and you're remembering that although you have deep ideological differences, that you're human beings trying to do your best. He said when that went away, when people stopped doing that, when the schedule changed, built around efficiency and fundraising, he said that's when all civility, all common sense went out of the Senate. And think about this, our whole nation is suffering now because of the unwillingness to put presence over efficiency. I mean, it's happening on a societal level, and I know it's happening to all of us on a personal level because I feel the pressure myself. Long before there was a pandemic, I already knew how difficult it was to be present with the people in my life who matter most to me. My wife, Jocelyn, she's so much smarter about this stuff and she's insistent about this stuff that a couple times a week, we will sit down and we will have a family meal. And there is enough research that says that simple act is life-changing for your kids. It also builds bonds of connections and families going on. So it's a simple thing that feels just like so antiquated and impossible in our busy lives. Jocelyn makes us do that, but you know, I'll be there at the dinner table doing the thing, and you know how this goes. I got my phone right down here, and I'm kind of like, well, if I just send this email, I'm gonna have a better day tomorrow if I can just do this now. And even when the phone isn't there, my mind is running through, how am I gonna solve that next problem? I'm obsessing about the next thing, and I'm sitting around this table with the people who matter the most to me in all of the world. And I know how hard it is to be present because of all of these things. But I just gotta say it, it's obvious, but I just have to say it. There is no substitute. There is no substitute for being at that table, present. There's no substitute I'm finding for, even though I hate driving my kids everywhere back and forth, there's no substitute for those moments in the car. You know, looking at them as much as I can safely while driving, but looking at them and connecting with them and not, you know, being on my phone at every stoplight and not, you know, like my mind's spinning. And that's not just true for them. It's not just, oh, this is a gift I want to give my kids. This is true for me. See, here's what I've realized probably over the last year or so. My kids are getting a lot older, but I've realized, and Jocelyn and I talk about this all the time, that in our lives, we were never happier than when our kids were small. And I think some of it is kids are cute and they say funny things like we heard at the beginning, and they just bring a smile to your face. But it's also because kids require a lot of work. See, we've been checking ourselves and we're like, is this just nostalgia? Because life was hard back then too. And you're right, those of you who are raising young kids, life is hard when you're raising young kids. But I think that's why for me it was so good, because you know what? When you've got little kids, if you're not present, someone's gonna get hurt. Right? If you're not focused on what's going on, like it could go wrong really quick, or you know, someone's gonna color on the wall. Like you gotta be there, you gotta be present. You have no choice. And for me, I realized how good that was for me. Like how healthy and healing it was for me just to go, hey, the email can wait. I mean, the house was so often a mess. Our house is way cleaner now, even though we have teenagers, because we have time, and I'm doing home improvement projects all the time that I could not even imagine doing back then. I mean, back then, even to mow the lawn, to find time to mow the lawn was such a task. I didn't know how to fit it in because we had young kids. And so on Thursdays, that's my day off, and Jocelyn was working on Thursdays, and I had Corbin and for a little while, Aria at home. And so Corbin and I had this ritual. He was a little baby, and I'd put him in a hiking backpack, and I'd go out and I'd mow the lawn until Corbin would fall asleep behind me, and he'd be like drooling on the back of my head. And I mean, that was the only way I could get the lawn mowed. And you know, the lawn had to be mowed eventually. Life was not easy. It was hard. And there were lots of things in life that didn't get done. But to tell you what did get done, I was way better at being present. And there's no question that was good for my kids back then, and it was good for me. And there's no question, even though my kids are older, even though Jocelyn and I have been married 21 years, there's no question that being present is still good for them, and it's still good for me. I'm telling you, if there were a better way to live, Jesus would have lived it. But there's no substitute for presence. That's why Jesus chose to come down in flesh, at this moment in time where he had to walk everywhere, and he chose, even though he shows he has the power just to say a word and heal somebody, instead he chose to physically put his hand on people to heal them. He engaged in face-to-face conversation. He sat down for long meals. One time he even got on a boat, sailed all the way across a lake to heal 2 guys, got back in the boat, went back home. Although Jesus could have with a word taken away the sin of the world, instead, he willingly hung on a cross because presence is the better way. And when Jesus looks at us today, here's what I know. He sees us in all of our struggle and striving, trying to be efficient, trying to be productive. And here's what he says. He says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke, lay your burdens down. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Jesus says if you're tired, if you're worn out, if you're burdened, the way out of it isn't more activity, it isn't more efficiency, religious or otherwise. Instead, Jesus says, come to me. Simply invites us into his presence because he wants to dwell in you and he wants you to dwell in him. And so I hope today you can allow yourself that, especially as we sing this last song, but even for the rest of the day, that you can allow yourself to simply exist in the presence of Jesus, to allow yourself to exist in the presence of whoever's around you today, especially on a day that's all about family, to allow yourself in this world that's demanding so much and where there are all these things that can ease our burdens, or at least they promise to. Instead, I hope you can make room in your life for the gift of presence. In fact, I want to pray for that for us right now. Let's pray together. God in heaven, thank you for showing us the way, for coming down to earth, first and foremost, just doing it in that way. But Lord, thank you also for coming down to earth at a time when life was slower and it was different. And God, that's just not like, that was an intentional point, God, and help us see that through Jesus, you're actually showing us a different way to live. You're calling us to a different way to live, a way of life that puts presence higher on the list than our productivity and efficiency. And so God, just help us right now, at least even for the rest of the service, by your Spirit's urging, help us just to be able to sit with you, to hear the invitation of Jesus. Help us come to you and dwell in you, and we invite you to dwell in us. Help us unburden ourselves while we just sit in your presence and bring renewal, bring life, bring healing, bring forgiveness, bring rest to our beings. Right now, Jesus, I pray that you'd accomplish that in us as we simply rest in you. Amen.
Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of our Pathfinder online community. If you're new here, we have some awesome resources for you in the description of this video, or you can go to pathfinderstl.org and find all sorts of good stuff there. I want to make sure that you know that while you're there, you can actually find our message podcasts. And that is an amazing way to catch all of our messages, or even go back and listen to older messages while you're on the go, while you're running, while you're riding in your car, or just while you're sitting at home. You can listen to our messages. I also want to make sure that you click the like button on this video and also share this video so that more people can see it. And even drop us a comment. Let us know how we can pray for you, or let us know how this service hit you. We want to make sure that you know that we're there for you. Now, I just want to say again, happy Mother's Day, and I hope you have an awesome week.